There are hands that never rest, hands that rinse the cloth, sweep the floor, mend what others forget, hands that ache quietly, not from weakness, but from being unseen. The world rarely turns toward such hands. It listens to the loud, rewards the certain, and leaves the gentle to fade like mist at dawn. Yet somewhere between the thread and the tear, between one sigh and the next, kindness waits, unmeasured, unpraised, undying. A girl once lived inside that hush. Her palms were small, raw, trembling with work. Every dawn she moved before the light itself, and when the day grew old, her shadow was still moving. She never asked for rest. She never learned to ask at all. But the quiet have a way of being seen by forces that do not sleep. Sometimes grace arrives disguised as water, as wind, as a fall that feels like ending. So begins her story, not with triumph, but with weariness, not with wings, but with washing. A well waits in the earth, dark and still. Its water hums like forgotten hymns, and beneath it, a world of slow mercy stirs. Mother Hulda is waiting. Once there were two daughters, one fair in spirit, one fair only in face. The elder, idle, sharp as frost. The younger, patient, worn, gentle as rain. They lived with a mother who loved only what shone. So the kind girl labored, and the other learned to command. Morning to night, the good child spun beside the well, her fingers red from thread and cold. One day the spindle slipped. It fell, rolling, tumbling, down into the dark mouth of the well. She leaned to see, to reach, and the water pulled her in. The world turned silver, the air slowed, silence bloomed like sleep. When she opened her eyes, she was in a meadow bright as noonday dreams. The grass shimmered like glass threads. A baker's oven stood beside the path, calling softly, "Take us out before we burn." She lifted each loaf, golden and warm, and laid them gently aside. Then an apple tree bowed low, its branches heavy with ripeness. "Shake me, child," it sighed, "for my apples long to fall." She shook and gathered them, her arms full of light. At last she came to a cottage whose windows breathed warmth and snowlight. There stood an old woman, eyes bright as moon water, hair like clouded frost. Her smile was both kind and strange. "I am Mother Hulda," she said. "If you will serve me truly, you shall lack nothing in my house." The girl bowed, for service was already her language, and so the days began, soft, slow, shining. She swept the floors until they whispered. She made the bed until the feathers danced in sunlight. Whenever she shook the bedding, snow fell upon the world above. Mother Hulda watched, and in her gaze the girl found something deeper than rest, a peace that asked nothing, a warmth that needed no praise. Time moved like a gentle clock, without sound, without hurry. Yet one morning, the girl looked toward the well of clouds and thought of home, not because she was ungrateful, but because kindness never clings. Mother Hulda understood. "You have served me well," she said. "Now you shall return." She led her to a great gate, shining like morning dew. When it opened, a rain of gold poured over her, dripping from her hair, settling into her skin. "This is your reward," said Mother Hulda, "for every small good you gave without asking." The gate closed, and she stood again upon the earth, light, gilded, whole. When she reached her home, the rooster crowed from the roof. "Cock-a-doodle-doo! Our golden girl is true." Her mother's eyes widened, not from love, but from greed. The lazy sister, seeing her glitter, burned with envy. She seized the same spindle, flung it into the well, and jumped after it. The water swallowed her too. She awoke in the same meadow. The oven called, "Take us out before we burn." But she turned her head. Too hot, too dirty. The apple tree sighed, "Shake me, child, for my apples long to fall." But she passed it by, too tired, too proud. At last she reached Mother Hulda's door. The old woman smiled again, and the girl agreed to serve. But her work was careless, her hands cold with spite. The bed she shook only half-heartedly. The snow that fell was thin and gray. Days grew heavy. The house dimmed. Mother Hulda said nothing, for silence teaches longer than scolding. When the lazy girl demanded to go, Mother Hulda nodded softly. "So be it," she said. The same gate opened, but this time no gold waited. Instead, a shower of pitch fell over her, sticky, dark, unending. "This is your reward," said Mother Hulda, "for the heart that never warmed." The gate closed. The girl stumbled back to earth, dripping with shame. When the rooster saw her, he cried, "Cock-a-doodle-doo! Our sooty girl is true." The pitch clung to her forever, and somewhere beyond the veil of clouds, Mother Hulda shook her feathers again, and the snow returned, soft, white, forgiving, covering even what was unworthy in quiet grace. The girl walked home, her heart light, her hands gilded with gold. She remembered the quiet hours, the hum of chores, the soft weight of snow on the earth. The lazy sister sat by the hearth, sticky with pitch, her eyes full of longing and lessons learned too late. Kindness does not clamor, it does not demand. It grows in silence, like moss on a shaded stone. The world above never knew the small hands that shook the feathers, the tender care that made snow fall. But peace dwells there, where the good have labored unseen, and each breath is its own reward. Even the hardest heart cannot escape the gentle justice of Mother Hulda's gaze. The girl smiled and let the golden warmth settle into her bones. The sun rose over the roof, washing the earth in quiet light, and she knew that labor done with love is never in vain. And when snow drifts softly from heaven, it is said that Mother Hulda is shaking her feather bed again. Soft flakes fall where no eyes watch, and somewhere a child bends to service, to small acts of goodness, and the world tilts gently toward mercy. In a quiet village, before the sun had brushed the rooftops with gold, a small tailor sat at his table, threads twisted between nimble fingers, needles caught the morning light. Every stitch was careful, every movement deliberate. His hands were tiny, but they carried the weight of ambition. A fly landed on his cloth. He crushed it swiftly, and in that small victory felt the first flutter of courage. Outside, the streets were hushed. The world measured little things with little noise, yet he carried dreams that stretched beyond the hills. He paused, looking at his work, at the plain pieces of cloth, waiting to become something greater. The quiet brilliance of cleverness sat heavy in his chest. Somewhere beyond the village, forests whispered of giants and trials. Mountains yawned like promises. Rivers glimmered like untold stories. Yet here, in his small room, he gathered courage like threads on a spool. A single needle could pierce cloth. A single hand could shape destiny. And so he sat, waiting for the hour to come when the world would notice him, not for noise, not for gold, but for the daring heart that believed even a small hand could carry the largest dream. The tailor had finished his work. Sunlight touched the windows, but his eyes were on a small fly. It buzzed boldly over the cloth. Quick as thought, he crushed it. 7 flies at once. Gone. He wrote upon a piece of cloth, 7 at one blow. The letters danced, bold and clever, a banner of courage for a hand so small. He set out from his village. Hills rolled softly beneath his feet. Forests rose like green towers. He carried his banner proudly. Birds scattered as he walked. Rivers whispered secrets to him. Soon he met a giant, tall as the trees, broad as the sky. The giant laughed, shaking the earth. "You are small," he roared. "What can you do?" "I have 7 at one blow," said the tailor. The giant's eyes narrowed. He challenged the little man to feats of strength. The tailor used wit. He tricked the giant into lifting stones that were actually hollow. The giant strained, tired and confused. Deeper into the forest, wolves and bears prowled. He walked calmly. He spoke softly. He tricked them, trapped them, turned danger into laughter. A second giant appeared, meaner than the first. The tailor laughed at the size of him. He challenged the tailor to wrestle. The tailor offered clever riddles. The giant stumbled in confusion. The little man struck and ran. The giant fell into his own trap, and the tailor went on. At last, he reached the king's castle. The king heard of the little tailor who defeated 7 at one blow. "Bring him to me," he commanded. The tailor bowed. The princess watched quietly, her eyes wide with wonder. The tailor told his tale in short, quick sentences. The king laughed. He set impossible tasks, thinking size and strength would win. The tailor faced each task. He climbed walls, crossed rivers on planks, outwitted soldiers and guards. Every challenge met with wit, free danger, turned aside with clever hands. One task, a giant's hall. Doors swung wide, giants roared, Fire flickered. The tailor slipped between shadows, moved like a whisper. He struck, tricked, ran, leaving the giants tangled and embarrassed. Another task, a wild forest full of beasts. He sang softly. Animals came, curious. He guided them, fed them, and the path cleared. Even the king marveled. Finally, the tailor faced a dangerous river, current strong, rocks sharp. He tied a rope cleverly, crossed safely, and left the king's men shaking their heads. The princess smiled. The king realized strength was not in size, but in mind, courage, and heart. The tailor was rewarded. A marriage with the princess, a kingdom promised. Yet he remained clever, humble. He laughed, told jokes, taught his people to think, to dare, and the banner of 7 at one blow hung in the hall, a reminder that courage and cleverness live in even the smallest hands. He ruled wisely, quietly. Giants told tales of the tiny man who outwitted them. Forests whispered of him. Rivers sang songs of a hand that changed a kingdom. And at night, the little tailor sat in his workshop, now grand, threads and needles beside him. He remembered the fly, the first small victory. Every great feat began with one brave, clever act. The world moved, large and loud, but he had learned wit outshines size. Cleverness can topple giants. Patience carries the smallest hand through forests deep and dark. And so the tailor's story spread through villages, forests, mountains, and streams. Every child who heard it dreamed of daring. Every small hand felt its own courage. Even the princess learned kindness and cleverness were stronger than fear. Even kings saw that the clever heart can change the shape of the world. And the tiny tailor? He smiled softly, never forgetting the fly on the cloth, the small hand that carried the largest dream. The forest now lies still. The giants are gone. Only the echoes of clever steps and the soft whisper of a tiny hand remain. The little tailor walks through streets that once seemed large, now small beneath his careful gaze. Threads hang from his belt like quiet reminders of battles won without swords, without wrath. He smiles at the princess, whose eyes hold laughter not born of fear, but of shared courage. Together they move through halls that hum with a gentle peace. No trumpet announces their triumph, no banners ripple in the sky, only the soft rhythm of life, threads crossing, footsteps measured, hands steady with purpose. He remembers the flies, the daring words stitched on cloth, the forest, the giants, the clever tricks, all the small steps that became mountains and yet did not crush him. Bravery, he knows, is not a roar. It is a hand held steady, a mind sharp with kindness, a heart that beats even when the world whispers doubt. And when the sun sets softly over the kingdom, it is said, the valiant little tailor's thread still weaves courage into every quiet heart that listens and dares to dream. A father's words slipped like stones. He did not see how heavy they might fall. 7 sons ran laughing through the yard, strong, untamed, the pulse of life in their veins. A mother watched, quiet worry lining her face, hands folded, heart tight. And then words became wind. Wind became fate. The brothers vanished from the world she knew, wings where hands had been, ravens dark against the morning. Silence filled the rooms, echoed in empty chairs, and the house held the hush of unspoken sorrow. A sister stood small, tender as a new leaf, hope trembling in her chest. Her eyes followed the sky, her breath held steady, for she knew she must move where others could not. The path was hidden beneath mist and shadow. Rivers murmured secrets, forests whispered of trials, mountains waited with shoulders of stone. Yet still she stepped, hands stretched, heart unwavering. The world beyond was vast, unknown, but in her chest a quiet courage beat like a drum. And so the journey began, soft as mist, sharp as loss, shaped by love and the promise that even the smallest hand can reach the farthest sky. The sky darkened with wings. 7 ravens swept past the village, calling a lament only the heart could hear. The sister stood silent, hands pressed to her chest, breath catching in the hollow of the empty house. She remembered her father's words and her brother's laughter, now stolen by careless fate. She packed a small bundle, threadbare shoes on weary feet, and stepped beyond the familiar gates. Mountains rose like giants, shadows curling at their feet. Rivers wound through valleys, icy and unyielding. She called the names of her brothers into the wind, and the wind carried them to places unseen. Days blurred into nights. The sun hid behind clouds. She found forests deep, trees whispering in ancient voices, and streams that sang of patience. An old woman appeared by a shimmering brook, her eyes like lanterns. "Who seeks the lost?" she asked. "My brothers," said the girl. 7, all taken by my father's careless words. "I will bring them home." The old woman smiled faintly and gave her a golden thread. "Follow this," she said. "It will lead you to the truth where only courage can tread." She walked through thickets that tore her dress, over stones that cut her hands, and through mist that hid both path and hope. She climbed cliffs that scraped her knees, forded rivers that bit her ankles, and trudged through snow that whispered secrets of the unseen and the unseen trials. In a clearing, a castle rose, its towers touching clouds, its gates guarded by creatures of shadow and whispers of magic. She pleaded with them, showing kindness, patience, and the thread glowed in her hands, guiding her through the impossible. At the tower's peak, she found them, raven still, eyes bright with longing. She laid her hand upon them one by one, whispering words woven with love, patience, and faith. Feathers fell like rain, light returning to bones, and one by one, Her brothers stood as boys once more, their wings folded inside human shoulders. Tears met smiles in the quiet light that seeped through the clouds. She led them down through forests and rivers, over mountains and past creatures that had tested both cleverness and kindness. Each step home was slower now, filled with gratitude, each heart aware of the fragility of time and the weight of words. They rested under trees, their laughter mingling with birdsong, their hands brushing over streams and moss, learning again to be human in the soft light of evening. At the village, the father wept, and the mother held them as if to keep the world at bay. The brothers laughed again, and the sister smiled, quiet as the morning mist that had guided her path. The journey had been long, but the courage had not faltered. The magic had been real, but only because it followed love, patience, and steadfastness. Home was restored, yet changed, aware of its own fragility, and the world seemed softer, more alive, to every sound of wings, of laughter, of quiet courage returning where it belonged. She paused by the well, the place where her journey had begun, and whispered a prayer for those lost and found. Even the stones seemed to shimmer in approval, and the golden thread in her hand reminded her that love and courage can move mountains and cross the darkest rivers. As the sun dipped low, her brother's hands brushed hers, a silent promise that they would never forget the bravery that had returned them home. The village lay quiet, bathed in the soft glow of evening. 7 boys laughed gently, their voices echoing through streets that had known sorrow. The sister watched, her hands resting on the heads of those she loved. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying memories of fear, of longing, of nights spent alone and days filled with tireless hope. She closed her eyes and let the moments settle like snowflakes on still branches. The father's tears had dried, the mother's arms were open, and the air hummed with the subtle magic of hearts restored. No words could measure the quiet courage that had traveled mountains, rivers, and forests, but its presence lingered, tender and unassuming. Each brother touched her hand, a silent promise that love endured even through loss. And in that hush, the forest seemed to breathe alongside them, every leaf a witness to their journey. The sun dipped low, and shadows softened into a gentle embrace. And when the wind rustles through the trees, it is said the 7 brothers soar again, no longer lost, and their sister's heart remains steadfast and luminous. In the deep heart of the forest, where roots remember older names than man, hunger and cunning walk side by side, not enemies, not friends, just 2 ancient shadows drawn from the same breath of survival. Hunger speaks first, with a voice that trembles through fur and bone, that bends the proud and blinds the wise. It is the cold that moves without mercy, the ache that teaches beasts to prey. Cunning listens, quiet, patient. It waits where hunger storms ahead, learning the pauses between heartbeat and hunt. It is the thin flame that flickers long after the fire has died. Time sleeps here, Snow gathers like silence, and the trees keep watch over forgotten wars. Each sigh of wind carries an old secret, a tale of those who chased and those who ran too slow. In that stillness, pride stirs. A heavy shape moves through frost, guided by want older than the moon, and behind it, in the hush between breaths, a smaller shape follows, eyes sharp with knowing. The forest listens. Something ancient begins to wake. The forest had turned to glass. Every branch shimmered with ice, and the world spoke only in whispers. Through that frozen stillness, a shape moved, heavy, deliberate, each step grinding the snow's breath into silence. The wolf, his ribs pressed sharp against his hide, his breath fogging the cold like ghosts escaping. Hunger was his only companion now, a fierce, hollow drumbeat echoing inside his chest. For days he had hunted shadows, followed tracks that vanished before dawn. The forest gave nothing, not mercy, not meat, not sound. Then a flicker, a scent, faint but alive. From between two ancient pines, the fox appeared, thin, quiet, watching. His fur caught what little light there was, like fire half buried beneath ash. The wolf's eyes narrowed. The fox did not bow low, only enough to be forgotten, only enough to live. "Serve me," the wolf growled, his voice scraping against the cold. "Your cunning will feed my hunger." The fox's breath was soft, but his thoughts ran quick and sharp. He did not argue, he only nodded, because in a forest that remembers everything, disobedience becomes a story too short. They walked together, their shadows crossing like threads. The snow whispered beneath them, a sound between warning and prayer. Far ahead, the horizon flickered, a farmhouse breathing smoke and warmth. Through the trees, faint yellow light glowed like honey trapped in glass. "There," said the fox. "The hens sleep behind the wooden gate." The wolf's eyes burned. He could smell feathers, the pulse of life behind wood. His steps grew faster, his pride louder than his caution. The fox lingered behind, half swallowed by night. He listened to the wolf's weight crunch through frost and straw. He listened to hunger forget how to whisper. Then came the sound, the door cracking, the flutter of feathers breaking the dark, and the thunder of human feet. Light burst open, a lantern swinging wild, a shout tearing the calm. The wolf lunged through the panic, fangs meeting air and dust. A broom struck him across the muzzle. A child screamed. The fox stood still, hidden between shadows, watching how noise devours strength. The wolf tore free, his fur streaked with straw and shame. He fled across the field, breath sawing the night in two. The fox followed at a distance, his paws leaving smaller, wiser prints. When they stopped beneath the bare birches, the wolf turned, eyes blazing. "You tricked me," he growled, the words trembling from exhaustion. The fox only tilted his head. "If I had tricked you, you would not still be breathing." For a moment, the forest was silent again. Even the snow seemed to listen. The wolf's growl faded into a laugh, a sound too thin to be joy. He sank into the frost, and hunger settled beside him like an old friend returned. The fox looked toward the distant smoke where the humans had already forgotten. Then he turned back to the trees, eyes calm, heart still counting exits. Above them, the moon watched everything, as it always does, as it always will. Morning came slow, like light remembering its way. Frost clung to every branch. The forest shimmered, silent and cruel, its breath white against the waking sky. The wolf stirred, a low growl caught between hunger and shame. His eyes burned like dying coals. "You tricked me," he said. His voice cracked, a sound too weak for anger, too heavy for regret. The fox sat across from him, tail curled neatly around his feet. Snowflakes gathered on his fur, but he did not shake them off. "If I had tricked you," he murmured, "you would not still have teeth to curse with." The wolf's nostrils flared, but the truth in those words hung between them like smoke. They walked again, two shadows stitched to cold earth. No bird sang, even the wind refused to follow. The forest stretched endlessly, its silence pressing on every sound. Only their breathing moved, two rhythms, one heavy, one careful. The fox's paws left faint tracks that vanished before the wolf could match them. Cunning leaves no footprints long enough to chase. By midday, the wolf's hunger had become a voice of its own, whispering promises, mocking restraint. He snarled, "Find me food, or I'll eat you instead." The fox's eyes flickered, not fear, but calculation. He looked ahead, where a pale pond slept beneath its frozen skin. "There," he said softly, "the fish wait under the glass." The wolf stared. Nothing moved, only the faint glimmer of reflected sky. The fox stepped closer, his tone like lullaby and lie intertwined. "Dip your tail," he said, "and wait. The fish will rise to meet it. Be still, and they will cling." The wolf obeyed. He lowered himself beside the pond, his tail breaking the surface with a hiss of frost. The fox sat nearby, eyes calm, watching the ripples settle into perfect stillness. Minutes passed, then hours. The air grew colder, turning breath into crystals. The wolf shivered, but pride held him steady. He imagined the fish gathering, a feast waiting for his patience. Night descended, slow and endless. The forest dimmed to ink. The fox rose once, testing the air. He smelled no mercy in it. He turned to the wolf. "Hold fast," he whispered. "They bite slow but sure." And then he walked away, not far, just enough for distance to mean safety. The pond thickened, the wind stiffened, the stars stared down, bright, unblinking judges. The wolf tried to move, his muscles groaned, but the ice did not let go. Panic stirred like old blood. He pulled once, twice, nothing. The fox watched from the tree line, his breath thin, his heart neither glad nor cruel. The wolf's growl rose to a howl, carried across the sleeping woods. It echoed against trunks, against stones, against memory, and still the forest did not answer. For nature listens, but it does not take sides. It only remembers the noise we make before we vanish. The fox bowed his head once, a silent farewell. He turned toward the deeper woods, where hunger and cunning walked together again. Behind him, the ice held its prisoner, a shape caught between moonlight and shame. Dawn crept slow, soft and cruel, spilling thin light across the frozen pond. The forest began to stir, crows shifting, branches cracking, shadows stretching awake. From far off, the sound of voices, human voices, rose like smoke through the trees. Lanterns swayed between trunks, tiny suns carried by trembling hands. The villagers came, boots crushing frost, breath thick with purpose. The wolf saw them first, their shapes flickering in the half-light, their whispers sharp as flint. He tried to move, but the ice clung harder, a glass prison that refused to melt. He pulled, snarled, thrashed, each motion slower than the last. His hunger had turned to fear, and fear, in turn, to silence. The fox watched from the edge of the woods, eyes bright, body still. He could hear the shouts now, see the glow of torches dancing across the pond's cracked face. One villager cried out, "There, the beast!" Another laughed, swinging his stick like a weapon of story. The wolf's howl tore through the cold, a sound not of rage, but of something older, a creature realizing it had finally met the end it always carried. The blow came swift, then another. The pond split its reflection, light, noise, motion, and then nothing. The forest held its breath, smoke curled upward. The villagers' laughter echoed, harsh, nervous, human. And the fox? He turned away before it was done. He slipped into the underbrush, feet whispering across roots, tail low, ears turned from the noise. He did not run. He simply moved, quiet as a secret that refuses to fade. Behind him, the world grew louder, then still again. Laughter faded into wind. The torches dimmed. The story already was being retold. By the next night, the pond had frozen smooth again. No trace, no name, just the ghost of a reflection that would not rise again. The fox traveled far, days blurred like breath on glass. He crossed the valleys where snow whispered his name, past trees that leaned close to listen. He did not eat much. He did not sleep long. He carried something heavier than hunger, memory. Weeks later, the same village appeared beneath a silver moon. The air smelled of straw and smoke, of endings already forgotten. He paused in the square. Children's laughter floated from the tavern's edge. Men spoke of a beast, how it had been trapped, how they had saved their hens. Their words rose with pride. Their laughter struck the air like sparks. By the well, an empty barrel rested, its rim marked by teeth. The fox stopped there, tail still as stone. He looked once into the darkness inside and saw nothing, only the quiet shape of what was gone. He did not pity. He did not gloat. He only understood. Survival asks for no witness. It only asks to be repeated. He turned from the village, from the voices that built comfort out of cruelty. He stepped back into the woods, where names dissolve and silence remembers everything. And as the trees closed behind him, his breath vanished into mist. Thin, steady, endless. The clever endure. They do not celebrate. Dawn returned, not sudden, but slow, like forgiveness, too shy to speak. The frost loosened its grip on the earth. Icicles sighed and fell, shattering into nothing. Mist drifted low across the ground, soft as a secret between the roots. The forest exhaled. The long night had ended, but the silence remained. Through that silence, the fox moved, a pale flame wandering through breath and light. He left no mark on the melting snow. His steps were careful, as though he feared waking what slept beneath. The air smelled of damp bark and ash, of endings that refused to vanish. He paused beside a fallen tree, its hollow filled with frozen leaves. Here, once, the wolf had passed. His scent was gone now, washed away by time and thaw. But the memory lingered, thin as smoke, heavy as guilt. The fox closed his eyes. He could almost hear the echo, the weight of hunger speaking through another's voice. Hunger, that old companion, that tireless song. It never dies. It only changes shape. He had seen it take many forms. A shadow under ribs, a glare behind teeth, a whisper that says live, whatever the cost. The wolf's hunger had been loud, bright, burning everything it touched. The fox's own hunger was quieter now, not for food, but for distance, for safety, for one more sunrise unclaimed. He walked again, letting the forest close around him like a cloak of forgiveness. Light filtered through the pines, turning frost into dusted gold. Every breath shimmered and vanished, as if even air refused to stay. He passed a hollow stump, a frozen pool, a scatter of feathers from some forgotten hunt. Each thing whispered the same truth. To live is to leave something behind. The fox stopped where the ground softened, where sunlight began to taste of warmth. He looked toward the east, a horizon bruised with pink and silver. The forest was waking. Crows stirred above him, their cries like cracks in still water. The fox lowered his head, not in grief, not in peace, just in understanding. The wolf's hunger had been buried in ice and laughter, but the forest still carried it, in the bones beneath the soil, in the wind that never forgets. And his own hunger, it lived quietly now, a pulse beneath the ribs, a memory that whispered, "Go on." He listened, he obeyed. Step by step, he moved deeper into the trees, into the pale hush where nothing judged and nothing forgave. Above him, light spilled through the branches, soft as touch, brief as mercy. The fox did not look back. The past was not his to mend. The forest knew his name and would one day forget it. He walked anyway, for that is what the living do when the dead have gone quiet. The forest stirred. not suddenly, but like something waking that remembers how to dream. Wind brushed through the branches, carrying the hush of thawing snow. Somewhere far off, a stream began to sing again, its voice trembling from the cold. Birds returned, soft-winged and careless, their songs small pieces of light stitched into the morning. They did not look down, they did not remember. Their hearts were clean of stories. The fox watched them from below, eyes half-lidded, tail still. He envied that forgetfulness, the way the living could move through the ruins of memory without bleeding from it. A leaf dropped beside him, light as breath. He watched it turn once, twice, then vanish into the damp soil. Such is life, he thought. It rises, it falls, it dissolves quietly back into the same earth that once called it forth. The forest had begun to glow now, its air silver and soft. Every tree stood like a witness, their bark etched with the stories they did not tell aloud. The fox walked between them, a quiet shape inside a greater silence. The snow melted around his paws, and the world began again. Yet he felt it, that weight beneath his ribs, neither sorrow nor peace, something between. Survival had its cost, freedom had its echo. Each breath was borrowed. He stopped beside a pool of meltwater. The surface trembled, then steadied. For a moment, he saw his reflection, blurred, uncertain. The forest behind him shimmered in it, branches bending like lines in a story he no longer owned. He saw two shapes in that reflection, his and something larger, fading, the ghost of a wolf that hunger had carved into legend. He blinked, and the image was gone. The forest said nothing. It simply breathed, as forests do when no one is watching. Cunning, he thought, was a strange kind of mercy. It saved him again and again, but never gently. It was the blade that cuts clean, the map that shows the way out, but never home. He felt its pulse inside him, not pride, not triumph, only knowing. Cunning was the frost that stayed after the fire had gone. It warmed nothing, but it endured. He walked on. The ground softened beneath his paws, moss drinking the last of the snow. The scent of new growth filled the air, sharp, wet, alive. Everywhere life began again. Beetles moved beneath bark. Roots whispered to roots. The stream's voice rose brighter. The forest had forgiven itself, but the fox, he carried what it forgot. The hunger, the fear, the cold that taught him to listen. He glanced upward. Above the branches, light filtered through in threads, turning every drop of water into fire. It was beautiful, and it was indifferent. He smiled once, a small, tired thing. The forest was a mirror now, everything alive, everything watching. And in that gaze, he felt both burdened and freed. He was alone, but he was still moving. At the edge of the clearing, sunlight spilled through moss, thin, golden, trembling. The fox stopped there, one paw half lifted, as if caught between staying and leaving. The air was soft with dust and dew. Every sound had grown shy. Even the wind moved gently, careful not to disturb what lingered. He looked ahead. The forest opened like a mouth full of memory. Light pooled on the ground, quiet as breath after prayer. His shadow stretched long before him, a dark thread pulled thin across the green. It wavered once, then began to fade. In that fading, the fox saw the story, his, the wolves, the forests, all dissolving into one slow silence. He listened. The trees did not speak. They never had. They only remembered. A crow stirred somewhere high above, its cry short, uncertain, a single note that fell and vanished before it reached the ground. The fox lowered his head. He felt the sun warming his back, the faint tremor of roots beneath his paws. The world was moving on, and he was only passing through it. Every step, every breath was already becoming a story someone else might tell. But stories forget their owners. They remember only rhythm, the pattern of loss repeating itself until it sounds like life again. He walked forward, slow, deliberate, his tail brushing the moss. Behind him, the path he'd taken was already closing, leaves shifting, light rearranging itself. The forest absorbs everything. It does not weep or praise. It simply gathers, folding moments into soil until they become part of its breath. A small stream whispered nearby, sliding over stone. The sound was familiar, like something once loved, now distant but kind. He paused there, listening. The water did not ask. The wind did not answer. He thought of hunger, how it had shaped him, how it had shaped them all. It had teeth once. Now it had memory. He thought of cunning, how it had saved him, how it had left him hollow. It was both shield and wound. And he thought of the forest, the only witness, the only judge, the only God that stayed. He exhaled slowly, and the sound of it was almost a sigh. The light moved across his face, then slid away. His shadow grew thin, then vanished altogether. All that remained was the echo of pause fading into green, the soft rhythm of steps that did not return. The forest listened once more. It breathed him in. It closed the air behind him like a curtain drawn on memory. No ending, no applause, only stillness. Cunning and hunger circled again. Two old forces, unbroken, unashamed. The trees swayed, their branches whispering something too ancient to mean. And somewhere, far beyond the clearing, the world began another story, the same yet new as it always does. The forest stood still, older by a breath, and quieter than before. The world was quiet before the test. Even the wind seemed to listen. Two paths wound through the valley, one paved smooth with pride, the other rough with grace. On either side of that road, two cottages breathed beneath the same sky. One glimmered with glass and silver, its hearth cold, its laughter hollow. The other leaned beneath the weight of years, its roof patched with mercy, its light made warm by want. Wealth and want, twin spirits sharing a single dawn. One fills the hands, the other fills the heart. The forest stood between them, a witness older than prayer. Its leaves whispered of balance, of heaven's quiet patience. Some nights, the stars hung low enough to touch the roof of the poor man's home. He would thank them for their company, as if gratitude itself were bread. The rich man slept beneath gold beams and dreamed of counting what could not follow him. Heaven listened to both, not to words, but to silence, that soft measure where truth is weighed. And somewhere, beyond the edge of dawn, footsteps began, heaven walking toward the earth. Twilight stretched its quiet hands across the road. Dust rose like memory. The wind carried the scent of iron and prayer. Two travelers walked there, cloaked, weary, unremarkable to any eye but heaven's. Their sandals whispered against the stones. Their faces were hidden by shadow, yet the light that followed them did not belong to the earth. God and Saint Peter walked as men, silent, solemn, bearing the shape of dust to measure the worth of what they had made. The sky had already dimmed to violet. Birdsong had fallen away. Each step echoed through the hush like a question seeking an answer. Ahead, the forest thinned into fields. Beyond the fields, a mansion glimmered, its lamps bright as coins, its gates tall and proud, its walls guarding warmth from need. They paused. Saint Peter glanced toward his companion. The air itself waited. At the gate, two servants stood, their faces pale beneath the lantern's glow. The taller of the travelers spoke, his voice soft, humble, carrying no command, only weariness. "Good evening," he said. "May a tired soul find shelter?" The servants exchanged glances. Fear, pity, and obedience twisted together. They turned inward into a hall of gold and stone. The master of the house reclined there, a goblet resting against his palm. The fire burned bright, but not for warmth, only for display. He looked up, annoyed. "Strangers?" he said. "What do they want?" "Bread," a servant murmured. "Rest. The night is long." The rich man's smile cut sharp. "No beggars at my door. The road is wide. Let them use it." And with that, he turned away, the goblet catching light like a small, cruel sun. The servants returned, hesitant, ashamed. Their words fell like stones. "My lord says the house is full." The travelers bowed their heads. "Then the night shall be our roof," said the taller one, and they turned. Behind them, the great doors closed, and silence filled the house once more, a heavy, glittering silence that no prayer could enter. Outside, the road stretched, pale under the moon. The wind rose again, brushing their cloaks with cold fingers. They said nothing. They did not need to. Their steps were light, but the ground remembered each one. Echoes between heaven and earth. Far behind them, the mansion gleamed still, its windows gold, its heart hollow. Inside, the rich man sat beside his fire, counting what would never feed him. Outside, two divine figures walked onward, bearing the weight of mercy unoffered. The stars watched without blinking. The night deepened, folding itself around them like a page turning, and somewhere beyond the hills, another light waited, a poorer one, flickering but alive. The road bent toward it, and the dust rose once more. The moon had climbed high, a silver coin lost in a deep, dark sky. The travelers walked on, their feet dusted white with frost, their breath pale against the night. Beyond the trees, a thin thread of smoke rose, fragile, trembling, the kind that belongs to hunger and hope alike. A small cottage waited there, its roof sagging, its window lit by one shy flame. Before they could lift their hands to knock, the door opened. The poor man stood within the frame, his eyes tired but gentle, his voice soft as worn cloth. "Come in," he said. "The night bites hard." Beside him, his wife nodded once, her face half lit by firelight, half shaped by patience. They stepped inside. The air smelled of wood smoke and bread long gone. A single chair, a broken stool, a hearth barely breathing. The poor man smiled, a smile that asked for nothing. He reached for the last crust of bread and set it before them as if it were a feast. "Share what we have," he said. "It is little, but it is honest." They ate in silence. The fire cracked softly, a whisper of warmth against the cold. Outside, the forest listened. Inside, time slowed to kindness. The wife poured water into clay cups. Her hands shook, but her heart did not. No one spoke of who they were. No one needed to. St. Peter glanced at his companion, and something passed between them, a light without a sound. When the meal was done, the poor man gathered what ashes remained, feeding the fire one last handful of wood. "You may rest here," he said. "The floor is hard, but the night will pass softer with company." The taller traveler rose. His face caught the glow of the dying flame. "My friend," he said, "your door opened before our hands could knock. You gave before we asked." The poor man lowered his eyes. "It is easy," he said, "when one has nothing to lose." The traveler smiled, and in that moment the air changed. The shadows on the walls trembled, and a light like morning spilled from the cracks between his words. The fire grew brighter, though no wood was burning. The air filled with a stillness, too gentle to fear. The poor man's breath caught. His wife stepped back, her eyes wide, but calm, as if she had always known. The traveler's voice softened, carrying the weight of endless skies. "You have given freely," he said, "and heaven keeps count of such things. Ask 3 wishes, and they shall be yours." The poor man hesitated. His hands trembled in the light. Then he spoke, slow, steady, each word born of humility. "Eternal peace in heaven," he said. "Daily bread while I live." He looked at his wife, her eyes shining in the glow. "And blessing for all who share my home." The light deepened, not brighter, but kinder. It touched the beams, the cups, the very air, and rested at last on the poor man's bowed head. When the radiance faded, the cottage stood still. The fire burned strong. The bread upon the table was whole again. Outside, The stars leaned closer, and the house, small, quiet, poor, glowed like dawn against the dark. Word spread like wind through dry grass. The story of the poor man's blessing moved from tongue to tongue until it reached the mansion on the hill. There, among mirrors and marble, the rich man listened, his hands clenched around the stem of his goblet. Gold flickered in his eyes, not light, but hunger. Heaven has walked this road, he said, and it came to a beggar's door. Servants bowed their heads. None dared answer. That night he could not sleep. His mind turned over the tale, jealousy whispering like fire in silk. If a poor man could summon God, surely wealth could do better. By morning he had dressed himself in humility, a robe of false grace, stitched with pride. He ordered the gates open, the lamps lit, the table set with food no man could finish. When the travelers came again, their faces quiet and unchanged, he greeted them with a smile that did not touch his eyes. "Welcome," he said. "Forgive my earlier blindness. My heart has learned generosity." The words glittered, but they were hollow. God said nothing. St. Peter only watched. "Sit," the rich man urged. "Eat, drink, rest." He bowed low, a gesture rehearsed, not born. When the meal was done, he spoke quickly, eager to trap divinity with courtesy. "I have heard," he said, "that heaven rewards kindness. So grant me, I pray, 3 wishes worthy of my station." The silence deepened. The air grew heavier. "Speak," said God at last, his voice quiet as ash. The rich man's smile widened. "First," he said, "I wish for endless gold, enough to fill the world with my name." The light around him flickered. Gold poured from his chest, melting into the floor, rising higher, heavier, until his knees bent beneath it. He gasped, but greed has no word for mercy. "Second," he cried, "a mansion greater than any king's, a monument to my glory." Stone rose at his command, walls glittering like frost, towers scraping the clouds. But pride builds too fast. The ground groaned beneath its weight. Cracks ran like lightning through the marble. The house collapsed inward, bearing silence beneath splinters of gold. Still he reached upward, hands trembling with fury. "One more," he shouted. "Heaven itself. Let me rule beside you." But the sky did not open. No gate appeared. Only wind, cold, endless, unanswering. The rich man fell to his knees, his voice breaking into the dust. Far away, in a small cottage now empty, the poor man took his last breath. His wife knelt beside him, her tears falling like soft rain. Light filled the room, a quiet warmth, a peace too deep for words. He smiled once, his lips forming gratitude, even in death. Then he was gone, his soul lifted like smoke, carried by unseen hands. The road between earth and heaven lay open. He walked it without fear. Behind him, the rich man rose to follow. He staggered through the ruins of his house, calling out into the light, "Wait! Take me with you! But the door ahead stayed closed. The distance between mercy and greed was wider than eternity. He pounded once upon the gate, and the echo came back hollow, his own voice and nothing more. The sky turned still, the earth grew quiet, and two names faded into time, one carried by grace, one by dust. Dawn returned. The world was the same, fields, stones, sky, yet something quiet had changed, something too small for eyes to see. The frost had melted from the grass. Birdsong came slow, hesitant, as if unsure the night was truly gone. Light crept across the valley, touching the roof of a small cottage that no longer breathed. Its door hung open. The fire had gone to ash. The air smelled faintly of bread and memory. Inside, the chairs sat as they always had. The table waited. The bed was smooth, its blanket folded by a loving hand. The poor man's cottage was empty, but not cold. Sunlight drifted through the window, spilling gold across the floorboards. It lingered on a cup, on a loaf unbroken, on the shadow of peace left behind. Outside, the forest stretched awake. Mist rose from the soil, like souls returning to the sky. The world moved on quietly, not mourning, not rejoicing, simply remembering. Heaven had paused here once. Its echo still trembled in the walls, in the wood, in the air that carried the faint hum of grace. A sparrow perched upon the windowsill. It chirped once, then fell silent, as if it too had come to listen. For kindness leaves traces long after hunger is gone. It warms without flame, feeds without asking. It lingers in places where goodness once stood and did not speak of itself. The cottage breathed that truth. The light upon its threshold seemed older than the sun, younger than sorrow. God's presence was not gone. It had simply softened, woven into the dust motes, the hush of wind through the poor man's open door. A piece of cloth fluttered by the hearth. It moved as if stirred by gentle hands. The ashes stirred once, and for a heartbeat, a glow returned, faint, trembling, then still again. Somewhere beyond the fields, church bells rang. Their sound was thin, almost fragile, carried by morning's breath. The poor man's wife knelt in the doorway. Her eyes were red, but her lips did not tremble. She whispered thanks, not for loss, but for the peace that filled its place. Behind her, the hills glimmered like folded wings. Light touched her face, and for a moment, she looked almost young again. The wind passed through the cottage. It carried no words, only blessing. It brushed the table, the door, the empty chair, then vanished into the day. The road beyond the fields shimmered faintly in the dawn. 2 footprints lingered there, half faded, but not yet gone. The world would forget their names. The seasons would pass, but the warmth remained, not in gold, not in glory, only in the hush that follows mercy. And the sunlight stayed, long after the bells quieted, long after the birds flew. It stayed, a silent hand upon the earth, holding what heaven left behind. The rich man's house remained, vast, silent, hollow. Its towers scraped the pale morning, but the windows no longer glowed. Curtains hung loose, their threads heavy with dust, gold tarnished to gray. The mirrors dimmed, every shining thing had grown tired of its own reflection. In the great hall, the fire had gone cold. A single chair stood overturned, its legs splayed like broken pride. No voice called, no laughter rang, only echoes, soft, hollow, the sound of wealth collapsing into memory. Servants lingered still, not from loyalty, but from habit. They whispered in corners, speaking of footsteps on empty stairs, of laughter that belonged to no one. At night, they swore they saw him, a flicker at the edge of the candlelight, a shadow that moved though no wind stirred. The house breathed uneasily, its walls cracking with sighs. Gold dust fell like snow from the ceiling, glittering for a moment, then fading to dullness. Outside, the garden withered. Roses grew wild, their thorns climbing the windows like guilt. The fountain was dry, the paths vanished beneath weeds. Time forgot the master's name. The world stopped speaking it. Only the empty house remembered, and even that memory was beginning to crumble. Wealth without mercy had become its own grave. Each coin a small stone laid upon a tomb no hand had blessed. The mansion still stood, but it no longer ruled the valley. Its power was a ghost, a glittering echo that frightened even the wind. Through the cracks in its walls, the forest began to return. First the moss, creeping softly across marble, whispering its patient prayers. Then vines, green fingers reclaiming what was once taken. Roots split the stairs, owls nested in the rafters. Rain slipped through the roof and baptized the silence below. The forest moved slowly, but it did not stop. It remembered, and what it remembered, it always took back. Soon the mansion was half swallowed. Only the highest spire still reached for the sky, a lonely finger pointing toward forgiveness that would never arrive. The servants left, one by one, until no footsteps answered the halls. The doors hung open. The wind walked freely through them. It carried leaves, dust, and the faint scent of iron and rain. At dusk, the shadows of trees fell across the house like veils. The forest had found its rhythm again. Each root, each leaf, a quiet hymn to balance restored. Beneath the cracked marble floor, gold coins lay buried, untouched, unseen, waiting for no hand. No one came to claim them. No one remembered to. Above, the moon rose, and light pooled through the empty arches. It touched what was left of a throne, and in that pale glow, a shape seemed to linger, a man of dust and regret, reaching for a crown that was never his. But the light shifted, and he was gone. Only the forest stayed. Only its breath filled the house. In the end, the mansion became another tree's shadow, another hollow in the roots of time, a kingdom with no king, a name the wind forgot, and all around it the forest whispered, softly, patiently, as if forgiving everything by simply surviving it. Time moved on, quietly, completely. The seasons circled once more. Spring to summer, summer to ash. The forest changed its color and forgot the names of those who'd passed. Heaven and earth breathed together again, balanced, patient, untroubled by what had come before. The road between the two cottages had grown soft with moss. No footsteps touched it now. It led nowhere and everywhere. A scar healed by time. Rain came often. It sang against stone and leaf, washing away the last traces of gold. The forest had swallowed the mansion whole. Only a single tower tip rose like a broken tooth from the green. Birds nested there. Their songs were clear, untouched by history, and beyond the trees, on the other side of the valley, the poor man's cottage still stood. The roof sagged, the wood was gray, but its window, its small, trembling window, still held light. One candle burned there, not bright, not proud, just steady. It did not boast. It did not beg to be seen. It simply shone, as it always had. The flame bent in the wind, then straightened again. Its glow touched the walls, the old table, the chair by the hearth. Everything it reached seemed softer for it, as if even emptiness could remember warmth. Outside, the sky deepened into dusk. The fields turned blue. The stars began their patient watching. From far away, the light in the cottage looked no larger than a star itself. But stars, too, are small when seen from earth. Perhaps heaven looked down and could not tell the difference. The forest moved around the house like a slow tide of green. Branches leaned close, curious, listening. The candle flickered, its flame whispering secrets only silence could keep. No voice called, no footsteps came, but still it burned, and in that faint, golden pulse was everything. The memory of kindness, the cost of greed, the breath of mercy that once walked among men. The wind rose, gentle at first, then stronger. It carried leaves, dust, and echoes. Somewhere in that wind, two names drifted, faint, unanchored, turning over and over until they were sound no longer. Only hush. Heaven heard and said nothing. It did not need to, for grace does not linger to be praised. It comes, it blesses, and it passes, like light over water. The forest exhaled, the fields slept, and the world was full again of ordinary peace. Still, in the distance, the candle glowed. It had outlasted grief, outlasted time, outlasted the hands that once lit it. It burned because it must, because kindness does not end. Its flame wavered once more, and the wind answered softly, carrying both names away. What remained was only the echo, a warmth without owner, a story without voice, mercy disguised as light, and the night, having heard enough, closed its eyes around the flame. There is a line too thin to see, where curiosity becomes peril, where wonder steps quietly into shadow. Between those two breaths, danger waits, soft spoken, patient, wearing the voice of charm. The forest knows this well. It hums with old stories, its branches bending as if to listen, its roots remembering every footstep that dared to walk too deep. Here, light filters like breath through lace, leaves shimmer with secrets. Each rustle could be wind or warning. Two hearts move through this hush, one cloaked in warmth and promise, the other trembling with trust. He speaks sweetly, his words smooth as river water. The trees lean closer. They have heard such tones before. Evening gathers its colors, folding gold into gray. A petal drifts to the ground, its fall unnoticed. Every step toward love is a step further from the path. Every glance back shows less of home. Somewhere ahead, a house waits, windows bright as eyes, and the forest holds its breath as the story begins to move. Morning came slow, soft as a secret. The bride dressed in silence. Her fingers trembled around the ribbon at her wrist, the one her father had tied there, a charm of warning and farewell. He had said, "Love can wear any face, child, even one that smiles." She had laughed then, but the sound felt hollow now. The forest waited beyond the gate, its edges breathing mist. The air smelled of rain and old bark, a scent that whispered, "Remember." She stepped forward, the path bent like a thought, trying to hide. Leaves closed behind her, soft and final. At first, there were birds, small songs, then none. The deeper she went, the quieter it became, as though sound itself were afraid to stay. Her feet marked the earth in careful rhythm. A trail of crumbs and ribbons fluttered faintly behind her, a fragile tether to the world she knew. Each turn of the path felt the same, each tree watching, each shadow waiting. Once she thought she saw movement, a shape between trunks, a flicker of red, a breath not her own. She told herself it was wind. It wasn't. The light thinned. The trees grew closer, their branches threading together overhead. Time folded. Her pulse became her compass. Then, a glimmer through the dark. A house, or what looked like one. Warm light behind cold stone. A door that seemed too eager to open. Her heart knocked before her hand did. The groom answered, smiling, perfect, his voice soft as velvet. "You've come far," he said. "Rest now. You must be tired." The way he said tired sounded almost like trapped. He led her inside. The air was clean, too clean, like something scrubbed again and again to hide what it once held. The walls gleamed white. The table was set, but no meal waited. Candles burned low, their wax pooling like melted time. She smiled faintly, trying not to show the tremor in her hands. He watched her too long, too quietly. Then he turned, his shadow stretching long across the floor. "I must tend to the cellar," he said. "Make yourself at home." The words felt gentle, but they didn't settle right. When the door shut behind him, the house seemed to exhale. The silence was no longer empty. It hummed, alive, listening. She walked slowly through the hall. Each step found dust, where there should have been none. Each room perfect, but wrong. A vase of fresh flowers that had no scent. A mirror that caught her shape but not her face. And faintly, beneath the floorboards, a sound like breath, like waiting. She stopped by the window. Outside, the forest leaned closer, branches brushing the glass like fingers. Her pulse beat in her throat. The air thickened. The house creaked, not from wind, but from something moving below. She pressed her palm to the door he had gone through. Cool wood, no sound, stillness coiled tight. She thought of her father's words again, and for the first time she understood them. Love can wear any face, even one that smiles. Silence thickened around her. The air itself seemed to wait. She turned slowly, her hand grazing the wall, stone cool as breath on glass. A door creaked open with a sound too human, too close to sighing. The scent hit her first. Iron, dust, decay. Not strong, but steady, like something buried too shallow. The rooms were neat, too neat, each one cleaned with care that felt like guilt. She walked softly, her fingers brushing small things, a comb with broken teeth, a ribbon torn in half, a shoe too small to be hers, and there, near the corner of the floor, a drop of red, not bright, old, but it had not dried. Her heart beat slow, deliberate, as if afraid to draw attention. The stairs to the cellar yawned wide. From below came the sound of water dripping, or something heavier. She took one step, then another. The candle in her hand trembled, its flame bending as though afraid to see. The air grew colder, the smell sharpened, her breath fogged before her lips. At the bottom, a door half open. Inside, a table laid not for supper, but for ending. Bones, rings, scraps of silk, a gown folded neatly, as if waiting to be worn again. She covered her mouth, but sound escaped anyway. A small gasp, soft as prayer. Then footsteps, above, then closer. She blew out the candle and hid behind the barrels. Her heart beat louder than her thoughts. The door swung open. Laughter spilled down the stairs, low and cruel, a sound that knew no guilt. The groom entered first, his voice almost tender. "Another guest," he said. "Let us show her our hospitality." Behind him, shadows, men with knives and smiles. They dragged a girl down, a stranger, weeping softly, her dress torn at the hem. The bride pressed herself deeper into darkness. Her hands shook against her knees. She could not look, but she could not stop hearing. Whispers, the scrape of metal, the sound of breath turning to silence. No cry, only the weight of it. Then, a sharp noise, something falling, a finger. It landed close, its ring glinting faintly even in the dark. She did not move, not until they laughed again, their voices rising with drink, forgetting caution. Then, slowly, she reached for it, the skin cold, the metal warm, a token, a truth. She slipped it into her pocket, the proof she would need to wake the world. They feasted on silence. She waited, counting breaths, counting sins. When the last laugh faded and the door creaked shut again, she rose. Each step back to the stair felt endless. Each board creaked like confession. She reached the hall. The moon shone faintly through the window, a blade of light cutting through shadow. Her hands found the latch. It yielded without sound. Outside, the forest waited, cold, endless, alive. She ran, her feet barely touching the path. Branches clawed her sleeves, but the moon guided her, white and unwavering. Behind her, the house remained, still, silent, fed once more. The trees closed in, the air softened. Somewhere far away, a bird began to sing, and the forest, that patient witness, opened its arms and let her through. She reached her father's gate as dawn broke over the fields. The sky was pale, washed clean, like something trying to forget the night. Her dress was torn, her eyes not frightened, but emptied. Her father saw her from the window. He did not call out. He only stepped aside to let her enter. No questions, only silence, the kind that listens deeper than words. Days passed. The village spoke in whispers. The forest, they said, had changed her. When the groom's letter came, bright seal, polite ink, inviting her to the feast, she said yes. Her father hesitated, but she only smiled, and her smile held no fear. The house filled with light, candles glowing against daylight, music soft as apology. The groom arrived first, charming, radiant, his laughter as smooth as honey over stone. He kissed her hand. He praised the spread of food, the flowers, the wine, all perfect, all hollow. The guests gathered, their voices weaving a net of noise to hide unease. The bride sat quietly, her fingers tracing the edge of her cup. When the last toast was made, she rose. The room stilled. "I dreamt," she said, softly, "a strange and heavy dream." The groom smiled. "Then tell it, my love," he said, "for dreams are harmless things." Her voice did not tremble. It moved slow and steady, each word deliberate, a thread drawing the dark into light. "I dreamt of a forest," she said, "where the path curved like a serpent, and there was a house, and a man who opened its door." The guests leaned closer. The groom's smile faltered, just slightly. "In the house," she continued, "the air was clean, too clean, and beneath it, iron, and beneath that, something worse." Someone laughed nervously. The groom joined in, a note too high, too quick. "But then," she said, "I found a ring." She turned her palm. The light caught it, a small circle of metal, glinting like dawn against the dark. The groom froze. The hall seemed to exhale. Candles flickered, chairs creaked, and every eye turned to him. She held the ring higher. "In my dream," she whispered, "the man who owned this ring stood where you stand now." His goblet fell. Wine bled across the tablecloth, dark, blooming like confession. He stepped back, once, twice, then turned, but the guards were ready. Her father's men, silent and waiting since morning. The groom tried to speak, but no words found him, only breath, and then nothing. The hall filled with stillness, not shock, not triumph, just release. Outside, the sky opened wide. Sunlight fell across the floor, washing red and gold. The guests rose slowly, like waking from a dream. The bride stood alone, her face calm, her hands steady. She looked at the ring one last time, then let it fall. It struck the floor softly, a small sound, barely enough to break the silence. And when it settled, so did everything. The night's horror dissolved into daylight. The forest beyond the window stirred, its shadows thinner, its roots unbound. The bride breathed once, deep, even, alive. No victory, only peace. Dawn returned. The forest exhaled. Mist curled through the roots, soft as breath on skin. Light moved between the trunks, careful not to wake the shadows too fast. The house of death still stood, empty, hollow, its walls stripped of whisper. The door sagged open. No voice greeted the morning, only dust and the faint scent of endings. The trees leaned close, their branches knitting above the roof. They cast long, gentle arms over what remained, not to hide, but to forgive. Grass crept through cracks in the floor. Moss climbed the steps. The forest was taking back what had always been its own. Birds returned first, not in song, but in cautious silence. They landed on windowsills, tilted their heads, and waited. When the wind passed, they sang, just once, a thin note, brave and uncertain, breaking the stillness open. The forest listened, then answered, leaves trembling like applause. Along the path, footsteps pressed softly into dew. The bride had come again. Her cloak brushed ferns, her breath clouded in morning air. Each step was slower now, not from fear, but from knowing. She walked the same trail that had once led her to horror. The same trees, the same bends, but everything had changed. Where once she ran, she now moved with calm. Her eyes, once hollow, now carried the weight of seeing and surviving. She paused where the forest had first swallowed her name. The light fell through branches there, thin, gold, unafraid. The air was no longer cold. It smelled of earth and rain and quiet forgiveness. Her hand brushed the bark of an old tree. It felt alive and listening. I came back, she whispered. Her voice did not tremble. She thought of the house behind her, the cellar, the laughter, the silence that once devoured breath. Now it was nothing but wood and ruin. Even its terror had gone soft, folded into the soil like a dream retold too many times. She felt no triumph, only stillness, the kind that settles after storms, when even grief is tired. Her heart did not race. It pulsed gently, steady as the morning light. She stopped at the clearing's edge, where the path turned toward home. The forest sighed, its darkness thinner now, its voice no longer warning, only remembering. A single bird flew past, white against the blue. Its wings left silence in their wake, a silence not of fear, but of peace. The bride smiled once, barely, enough to say she understood. She turned and the forest let her go. Behind her, the house faded into green. Roots crawled up its walls. A beam cracked, fell, and broke softly into moss. The earth accepted it all, the dead, the guilt, the noise. Only light remained. The path ahead shone pale, like thread drawn through fabric, fragile, endless. She followed it until the forest was only sound, until the sound became air, and the air, forgiveness. The village awoke again, slowly, cautiously. Laughter returned, not loud, not careless, but real. Children played by the well. The blacksmith's hammer rang through morning air. Smoke lifted from chimneys like small prayers. Life resumed its quiet rhythm, the kind that forgets and forgives at once. The bride walked among them sometimes, her steps light, her eyes distant, not from sorrow, but from peace too deep for words. She had no crown of tragedy, no mark of victory, only calm. Her hands were busy with small things, kneading bread, mending cloth, watering the narrow strip of garden behind her home. She lived simply, and the world seemed to honor her silence. Sometimes at dusk, she would stand at her doorway, watching the fields turn gold, the sky bleeding into violet. Beyond the fields, the forest, it glowed softly in the dying light, its edges silver with memory. The place that once swallowed her now seemed to hold her gently, a keeper rather than a captor. Wind moved through its trees, and their murmurs reached her, not warning now, but watching. In those moments, she would touch her sleeve, where the ring lay hidden in its fold, not as a trophy, not as proof, only reminder. The metal was cool, its weight slight, yet enough to steady her. She never wore it, never showed it, but she could not throw it away. It belonged to both worlds, fear and mercy. It belonged to the truth that had shaped her. The villagers whispered stories about her still. They said she had seen death and returned untouched. She never corrected them. Some stories are safer that way. At market, she would smile politely, trade bread for flour, and listen without truly hearing. Her silence had become her prayer, to walk, to breathe, to remain kind. When children asked about the forest, she would tell them, "It listens, always, so speak softly," and they would laugh, thinking it a jest. But she would smile, knowing nights were gentle, dreams lighter than before. Yet sometimes, in that thin hour before dawn, the forest would return, not as terror, but as presence. She would see its paths again, moonlit and endless, and hear a voice, not cruel, not kind, just knowing. It would say nothing, only breathe, only watch. And she would wake with tears, not of fear, but gratitude that she had heard it and lived. Her heart carried two truths now, that darkness exists and that light endures beside it. At sunrise, she would open her door, let in the air, and watch mist rise from the grass. Each morning, the forest shimmered in distance, neither friend nor foe, simply itself. And she, no longer the frightened bride, no longer the hunted soul, stood whole. The world was not kinder, but she was, and that was enough. Time folded over itself, days drifted into years, the seasons spun their circle, green to gold, gold to gray, and back again. The village grew, new names filled old houses, children forgot the fear of shadows, and the forest became a story told beside warm fires. The tale of the bride and her ring turned soft with retelling, edges dulled, details misplaced, like footsteps fading into moss. Yet the forest remembered, it always did. Its roots kept secrets no tongue could name. Its branches bent closer when the wind spoke of her. No one went deep anymore. Paths disappeared under ferns. Streams carved new ways through the dark. But still, the forest breathed, patient, eternal, a heart beating beneath bark. Sometimes travelers said they saw a light, faint, moving slowly between the trees, a small flame, steady as a heartbeat, wandering deeper, never dying. Some called it a spirit, some a warning, but those who looked closely swore it was a lantern, and they said if the night was still enough, you could see a shape beside it, a woman in pale light, her steps careful, her gaze calm. She never turned to look back. She only walked forward, as if truth still waited ahead. No one followed, no one needed to. In her house, the one by the edge of the fields, the ring still lay upon a wooden table. It glinted faintly when dawn arrived, a small spark of memory in the wash of morning light. Not of wealth, not of power, only of warning. Sometimes the bride, now older, would pause beside it. Her fingers would hover, but not touch. It was enough to see it, to remember. She would lift her gaze to the window, to the forest glowing beyond, green and endless, alive and quiet, and she would smile, not for what had been lost, but for what had remained. The forest shimmered under sun, dew bright as glass on every leaf. It did not threaten now, it simply was, the keeper of both terror and grace, the place where light and shadow shared breath. One path ran through it, half hidden, half forgotten, sometimes gold with morning, sometimes black with rain. Both paths led inward, both to the same still heart. There, the air stayed cool. There, time stood still. The forest would not confess its secrets. It had learned silence from the bride herself, and so the years continued, softly, without need for endings. The village thrived, children grew, stories faded into other stories. But sometimes, at dusk, when the fields glowed amber and the wind carried voices that were not wind, someone would pause, turn toward the trees, and see a flicker, a lantern's glow, a glint of gold, a breath between light and dark. They would listen, and the forest would answer, not in words, but in stillness. And somewhere within it, two paths waited, one bright, one dark, both leading to the same quiet heart, where fear had once lived and beauty had been born. The castle stands quiet, its stones heavy with memory. Echoes of footsteps long gone linger between walls and corridors. The wind moves through the halls. Candles tremble, their flames small and fragile. Shadows stretch and shrink. A distant owl calls. Its voice folds into stone and air. The scent of wet moss drifts beneath the doors. Stone floors press against bare feet. Chill rises with each step. 12 boys lie sleeping, breaths even. Dreams flicker. One runs through a meadow, water cold against his legs. Another leaps over logs, laughing as leaves brush his face. A third imagines climbing trees, sunlight warming his shoulders. Joy threads briefly through shadowed quiet. Their mother moves softly, hand brushing doors she fears to open. Love presses her chest, stone and feather together. Hope flickers, dim and stubborn. Fear curls beside it. Memory tangles with what may come. Her heart hovers between courage and dread. Outside, crows gather. Branches tangle in the wind. The forest leans closer, patient, watching. Somewhere among roots and moss, a secret begins to stir. Small, subtle, waiting for the right moment to reach toward the castle walls. The mother stood at the edge of the doorway. Her hand lingered on the wood, a breath held, a pause that stretched like the shadows along the hall. "Go carefully," she whispered. Her voice trembled, not loud, not commanding, a prayer carried in silence. The boys gathered, each face a mixture of fear and resolve. One brushed a tear from another's cheek. One lingered on a bootlace, tying it slowly. Hands met, then separated. They were together, yet the forest waited. The first steps on moss were soft. The wind carried their sound away. Branches whispered above, leaves brushing faces, as if the forest itself watched. They crossed streams, cold water biting ankles. Rocks slipped beneath toes. A fish darted past, silver and quick. The youngest shivered. An older brother wrapped an arm around him. "Keep moving," he murmured. And they moved. Hunters passed nearby, shadows sharp against the trees. The boys crouched low, hearts hammering, breaths shallow. The forest hid them. It guided their steps. They learned which berries were safe, which roots could be eaten raw, which leaves hid water beneath them. Each day a lesson, each night a fire sparked, small and guarded. The flames reflected on eyes, on smiles brief but warm. Laughter came, quiet at first, a tumble over roots, a shared joke about a bird, a sibling squabble over who would chop wood, a push, a shove, and then a hand offered, a a smile returned. Days became rhythms. Morning light filtered through leaves. Streams murmured secrets. Owls watched from branches. Foxes darted. The forest breathed around them. Some nights were harder. Rain fell, cold and relentless. Shelter was a tangle of branches, moss, and leaves. They huddled together, shared warmth, whispered stories to keep fear away. Other nights were gentle. Moonlight silvered the tops of pines. Shadows danced on water. They moved silently through glades. Every step a learning, every glance a memory. Small conflicts arose. One brother angry over a dropped fish, another stubborn over a path. Disputes softened with laughter. Hands met in forgiveness. Unity was fragile, but it grew stronger with every trial. The forest was not only a refuge, it challenged them. Roots tangled, streams roared, wind howled through branches, yet it offered protection, food, shelter, a rhythm to follow. Birdsong threaded through mornings, leaves rustled with secrets, even shadows seemed alive. The boys learned to listen, to move with the forest, to survive not only with strength, but care. And so they lived, hunted, gathered, rested, played quietly in the green halls of trees. Their hearts beat together, their eyes watched together. The forest held them and shaped them as it shaped the light through its branches. She grew slowly, as if the castle walls had folded her into their quiet, hands curious, fingers brushing tapestries and candle flames. She followed shadows along corridors, listened to the echo of her own steps, and wondered what lay beyond. A bird trilled at a window. She pressed her face to glass, watching wings flutter like secrets escaping the towers. She heard whispers of brothers, stories told in hurried tones, in hushed voices by servants, in fleeting glances from the queen herself. Curiosity tugged at her, pulling her toward the forest long before her feet would reach it. The day came when she stepped beyond the walls. Leaves crunched beneath her shoes. The wind stirred her hair. Sunlight spilled through branches, painting paths in gold and shadow. Streams trickled over stones, water murmuring as if guiding her. An owl blinked from a branch. A fox paused, then vanished into ferns. The forest tested her, twisting roots, hidden dips, brambles catching sleeves. Rain fell softly. Pine needles smelled sharp and wet. Mud rose to meet her boots. She paused, listened, followed the rhythm of the woods. Feet learning the pulse of hidden life. Signs appeared in quiet moments. Moonlight reflected on a puddle, shimmering like a path she might take. Wind shifted, carrying scents of pine and wet earth, drawing her toward places unseen. Streams murmured again, as if speaking only to her. Curiosity wrestled with fear. She felt the forest watching, sometimes gentle, sometimes stern. Shadows moved where no one stood. A leaf trembled as though pointing a direction. Small, subtle, magical in their insistence. She remembered stories of enchantments, of siblings hidden by spells. Her heart pulsed faster. The forest whispered patience. The river murmured riddles. Every step required listening, every glance measured. She slept under ferns one night, blanket of moss and fallen leaves, stars above, glimmering like tiny eyes. Her dreams mixed with the forest, branches, whispers, her brother's laughter hidden beneath the green. Morning came, mist rose from the river. She followed its silver trail. Every sound mattered, a bird calling, water trickling, twigs snapping beneath careful feet. Her breath slowed, heart steady, every sense awake. She felt the spell before she saw it, a hum in the air, movement in stillness, a tension that made the leaves shiver. The forest both guiding her and testing her resolve. Foxes watched from shadows. Streams glimmered like threads of light. Wind carried messages she could almost understand. Moonlight would catch her path again, every sign a gentle insistence. She was close. She moved forward, feet soft on moss and soil, hands brushing ferns, eyes searching the quiet shapes of the forest. A sister's patience, curiosity, and courage becoming the rhythm that would lead her home. She paused at the edge of the clearing. 12 figures moved among the trees, still, silent, her breath caught. Her heart raced, a step forward, then another. Hesitation lingered between the leaves. The brothers' eyes turned slowly. Recognition flickered, tiny sparks in the quiet shadows. Some stepped closer, some stayed back. Each movement measured. She knelt, placing small offerings on the forest floor. A basket of berries, a soft cloth she had carried, whispered names into the wind, her gestures patient, gentle, deliberate, no rush, no demand. A bird flitted near, watching. A fox paused, ears pricked. Sunlight spilled through the canopy, touching branches and shoulders, illuminating hope. One brother leaned forward, fingers brushed hers. A laugh, soft, almost unsure, rose like sunlight through leaves. Another chuckled, then joined. Then all were laughing, small bursts of warmth threading through years of quiet. Step by step, they closed the distance. She mirrored their movements, hands held, arms wrapped around shoulders, faces pressed into hair. The forest stirred, leaves whispered, rivers murmured, a deer froze, then bounded away. Branches swayed as if exhaling relief. Their laughter grew, more certain now. Voices mingled with the wind. The spell, woven in years of silence, unraveled slowly, thread by thread. Small gestures first, then soft laughter, then full recognition. She remembered their childhood dreams. The meadow, the river, logs leapt over, eyes bright with play. Years of waiting fell away like autumn leaves, drifting on a gentle stream. They embraced again and again. Words were scarce. Touch said everything. Love, fear, endurance, patience, all folded into the silence between their hearts. The youngest brother smiled, eyes wet with relief. The eldest placed a hand on her shoulder, firm, protective, yet gentle. They walked slowly, hands clasped, through paths remembered and new. The forest exhaled quietly, shadows softened, sunlight spread through the canopy. Leaves murmured the memory of years past. Wind carried echoes of small footsteps, whispered laughter, and the gentle pulse of reunion. All was still, yet alive. The spell was gone, but the memory lingered in the soil, in the moss, in the wind. They were free. The forest held them and breathed alongside them, soft, patient, eternal. Morning light filtered through the trees. Mist rose from the river, soft and silver. Birdsong threaded the air. A woodpecker tapped gently. A distant crow cawed, then fell silent. Leaves rustled, dew trembling on each tip. The brothers stirred, one stretched, arms wide, fingers brushing sun-warmed leaves. Another yawned, then laughed softly at a forgotten dream. A third splashed in the river, water cold against ankles, and they all chuckled quietly. They moved slowly, steps careful, deliberate. Hands brushed bark, fingers touched moss. Eyes scanned light and shadow. Small gestures of freedom, each one a celebration. The sister watched, her heart still. She breathed with the forest. Patience had carried her. Endurance had guided her. Love had held steady, quiet and unwavering. Through years of waiting, birds rose into the canopy. A fox slipped through ferns, pausing to glance at the figures below. The river murmured. Branches swayed gently, as if nodding to the reunion. They shared small smiles, a whispered joke, a playful shove. One brother picked up a fallen leaf, tossed it into the air, and laughter followed. It was quiet, it was gentle, it was life returning. Sunlight spilled across moss and roots, catching droplets from the night. The air smelled of pine and wet earth, rich and soft. The forest held each moment, watching without interference, its movement subtle, its breath steady. The sister knelt by a stream, watched her reflection ripple, saw the boys, free and alive. A meditation on care, patience, courage, and the quiet power of love endured. Mist lifted slowly, shadows withdrew from the sun. Every branch, leaf, and stone seemed aware, bearing witness to what had been saved. Small animals moved cautiously, then resumed their day. A rabbit nibbled at moss, a bird hopped along a branch. The forest exhaled. They walked together, hands brushed, fingers intertwined, eyes met, and stillness, gentle and complete, held the moment. The morning was long, slow, measured, filled with life, filled with care. Every sound, every movement, every breath carried the soft echo of endurance. The forest opened before them. Sunlight spilled in gold ribbons. Branches swayed gently. The brothers moved among trees. One crouched by a fern, examining a bright mushroom. Another knelt by a stream, letting water run through his fingers. A third laughed quietly, finding a nest of twigs and leaves. Small discoveries, soft joy. Leaves crunched beneath their feet. Twigs snapped. They ran a short race, then collapsed into moss, breathing in shared laughter. The sister walked behind them, hands brushing bark, fingers tracing mossy patterns. Her heart slowed. She watched them learn again to be free, to be together, to care for one another. One brother stumbled over a root. Another caught his shoulder. A hand on an arm, a steadying grip, a glance that said, I am here, always. They explored quietly, every shadow measured, every sound noticed. Foxes darted past, squirrels leapt from branch to branch, birdsong carried across the clearing. The forest seemed alive with approval. The sister paused, breathed, reflected. Courage grows quietly, she thought. Patience shapes the world slowly. Care leaves traces that endure longer than fear. A breeze lifted. Rustling leaves spoke of old worries fading. Shadows lengthened, then receded. The echo of past fears dissolved into sunlight. They gathered near a stream. Water glimmered at their feet. Shared smiles passed, small touches of hands, playful nudges, soft laughter threading between them. The eldest brother lifted a fallen branch, carried it for the youngest, protection without words. The youngest rested against his shoulder, comfort, security, family. They walked slowly through ferns and moss. Branches brushed gently above. Sunlight flickered across faces, each movement quiet, deliberate, a rhythm of togetherness. The sister knelt by the river bank, watched reflections ripple, saw their joy, their care, saw love shaped by trials, saw endurance turning into gentle strength. Evening approached, light softened, the forest seemed to bow. Shadows melted into golden mist. Every sound was small, careful, every movement measured. They lingered in quiet, hands held, eyes met, hearts beat together. The forest breathed with them. All was calm, all was right. The 12 walked together, feet pressing soft earth, hands brushing lightly, fingers intertwined. Sunlight filtered through the canopy. It caught on dew. It touched their hair, their shoulders, the moss beneath their feet. Shadows shifted with the light, merging, stretching, then dissolving into gold. A gentle wind stirred, carried scents of pine and river, carried whispers of the past and promises of days yet to come. They followed the river. Its water glimmered like silver threads, bending around stones, singing softly. A flower leaned over the bank, white, delicate, trembling in the breeze, witness to what had been endured. Laughter rose quietly among the brothers, small nudges, hands resting on shoulders, eyes meeting with warmth. The sister walked beside them. She smiled softly, every step measured, every glance deliberate. Birds moved above. A deer paused, watching. The forest held its breath. then exhaled slowly. The path curved through ferns. Light danced across leaves. Branches swayed as if bowing. Shadows melted into sun. Time seemed to stretch, then stand still. Memories lingered in the soil, in roots, in the river's gentle murmur. Every stone, leaf, and petal held stories of trials, of courage, of love endured. The brothers walked slowly, step by step, hands brushing, laughter soft, echoing only in the hush of leaves. Every movement a quiet hymn. They reached a clearing. Sunlight spread across their faces. Shadows and light intertwined. A single flower bent over the river, its petals trembling. The forest whispered softly, a music without sound. They paused, breathed, saw each other clearly, saw themselves, their journey, the bonds that had carried them. Evening light settled on the trees. The river reflected gold and green. Wind stirred the branches, soft, gentle, a reminder of patience, courage, and endurance. They moved again, feet tracing familiar paths, hearts aligned, hands still joined. All was still, yet alive, and in the forest, time held no claim. Memory rested in leaves and soil. Love endured. Silence settled softly, like dust. The song of survival lingered, soft, unbroken, eternal. There are secrets that do not whisper of sorrow, but of wonder, quiet, shimmering, untold. Sometimes joy itself hides behind locked doors, and laughter leaves footprints that morning light cannot find. In a kingdom wrapped in sleep, 12 princesses wake each dawn with worn shoes and tired smiles. Their father, a king with worry in his eyes, counts the pairs laid neatly by their beds, each one frayed, each one silent proof of nights that no one remembers. He sets guards at their door, locks upon their chambers, but still, when the sun rises, the shoes are broken again, as if touched by invisible dances, as if the moon had borrowed their steps. Beyond the walls, the world only wonders, but in the heart of the forest, fate waits, in the shape of a weary soldier, a man who has seen too much and still believes in small miracles. He listens where others demand answers. He follows where others fear the dark. And through him, the silence of 12 hearts will learn to speak. This is the tale of footsteps heard only by the heart, and of love that walked in silence. The king, heavy with worry, sent word through every kingdom. Whoever could uncover the mystery of his daughter's worn shoes would win a princess's hand in marriage. But whoever failed would lose his life at sunrise. Many came, princes with bright armor and proud hearts. Each was welcomed with feasts and laughter that sounded almost kind. Each was led to his chamber beside the princess's room. Each was given wine sweetened with sleep, and each, by dawn, was carried out cold and silent, never knowing what music had danced beneath his feet. Then came a soldier, poor, tired, his sword traded long ago for bread. He had no name worth remembering, only a heart that still believed the world could change. On the road, he met an old woman, her cloak gray as winter rain. She looked at him, saw the weariness behind his eyes, and said softly, "Drink not the wine they offer. Watch with patience, and take this cloak. It will make you unseen." That night, when the princesses smiled and poured his cup, he only pretended to drink. He waited as their laughter faded and the room grew still. When midnight came, the eldest rose and tapped her bedpost thrice. At once, the floor opened to reveal a stairway spiraling deep into darkness. One by one, they descended, their slippers brushing softly against stone steps that glowed faintly like moonlight. The soldier followed, hidden beneath the old woman's cloak. Beneath the earth, a forest shimmered. Its trees hung not with leaves, but with silver branches. He broke one, and it sang like a bell in his hand. Deeper still, another forest, its branches of gold, then diamond, each brighter than the last. Beyond them, a lake lay waiting, black and shining as glass. 12 boats floated there, each rowed by a prince whose eyes gleamed with enchantment. The princesses stepped into the boats, their laughter echoing softly, and the oars dipped like whispers into the still water. Across the lake, music rose, harps, flutes, a song that carried the ache of dreams. They entered a palace of crystal and candlelight, and there they danced. All night they danced, the soldier watching unseen, their feet weaving circles upon the marble floor, their slippers fraying as stars faded above. When dawn trembled at the edge of the lake, the princesses returned, their gowns dim with weariness, their shoes torn and quiet. The soldier followed, still silent, carrying proof, a golden goblet, a branch that still shimmered with dawn. The second night came, and again he followed, watching, waiting, each dance repeating like a secret song. By the third night, he knew the truth in full, the hidden world, the enchanted princess, the sorrow beneath their joy. When the morning sun filled the hall, the king called for him, and the soldier bowed low, placing before the throne the treasures he had carried back, a silver leaf, a golden branch, a cup of crystal wine. He spoke quietly, his voice steady as truth itself. "My lord, your daughters dance each night in a kingdom beneath the earth. There they meet 12 princes who keep them bound to a spell of secret joy. I have seen their path, their laughter, their weariness. Their shoes are worn by the steps of midnight. The princesses turned pale, their silence heavier than the crown upon their father's brow. The eldest at last lowered her eyes and whispered, 'It is true.' The king's sorrow eased, though wonder still trembled in his voice. He asked the soldier which daughter he would choose, and the man, humble and unsure, looked only at the eldest, the one who had led them through the dark, the one whose quiet gaze held both guilt and grace. 'I will take her hand,' he said softly, 'for she has carried the weight of 12. And so, beneath the same sun that once revealed worn shoes, the soldier and the princess were wed. The stairs beneath the castle sealed themselves in silence. The music below was never heard again, only remembered, like the echo of a dream that fades when morning calls. The castle is quiet now, no laughter behind locked doors, no whispers beneath the floor. The music has ended, the silver leaves have lost their shimmer, and the golden goblet rests, cold and still, upon the king's table. The 12 princesses sleep, their dreams light and unburdened. No footsteps echo through the night, no spell calls them downward. They rise with the sun and smile without fear. The soldier, once nameless, once only a shadow following secrets, now walks in light. Yet sometimes, when the wind drifts through the corridors, he pauses as if listening for the faint rhythm of unseen harps. He remembers the shimmer of diamond trees, the sigh of silver branches, the ache of beauty bound by enchantment. Truth, he has learned, is not always loud. Sometimes it waits in silence until someone dares to follow it into the dark. Some dances, he knows now, are meant to end, not in sorrow, but in understanding. And beneath the castle floor, where shadows once danced and secrets breathed, the music waits still, patient, eternal, and kind. If you listen closely, you may hear it, a faint trembling of joy that never truly fades. There are hands that work even when the world sleeps, hands that patch what is torn, that measure quietly, that hope without saying so. In a narrow street, beneath a roof touched by rain, a shoemaker and his wife lived by the rhythm of leather and thread. Their tools were few, their coins fewer still, yet their hearts held a patience that no hunger could wear thin. Each night they spoke softly of better days, counting the scraps left on the table as if they were promises. He would set the last piece of leather upon the bench, whispering, "Tomorrow, perhaps." And when the candles dimmed, only the moon kept watch over his quiet faith. But sometimes, when kindness lingers long enough in the air, the unseen begins to listen. It comes not with thunder, nor wings, nor crowns, but with the smallest rustle of grace, a thread pulled through silence, a gift born of gentleness. And so begins the tale of a man who stitched more than shoes, and a woman who believed in something she could not see. A tale of work, of wonder, of shoes stitched by moonlight, and hearts mended by grace. Night settled like a quiet promise. The little workshop, dim and weary, breathed softly beneath the moon. The shoemaker laid out his last piece of leather, smooth, clean, precious as breath itself. His hands trembled, for there was no coin left for more. He measured, he cut, he prayed, not with words, but with a slow, lingering glance toward heaven. Then, with a sigh, he set the pieces on the bench and whispered, "Tomorrow, perhaps." He and his wife shared a crust of bread, a flicker of hope, and then they slept. Morning came with a hush that felt strange, too soft, too golden. When the shoemaker lifted his eyes, the bench was no longer bare. Before him stood a pair of shoes, stitched so neatly, cut so finely that no king's cobbler could have bettered them. He turned them in his hands, the seams perfect, the leather shining as though kissed by dew. His wife gasped. Her laughter trembled between disbelief and joy. They sold the shoes that very day, and with the silver earned, bought enough leather for 2 pairs more. That night, again, the shoemaker laid the leather out, neatly as before. He kissed his wife's forehead, extinguished the lamp, and left the rest to silence. When dawn came, so did wonder. 2 pairs now, each flawless, each glimmering in the morning light. The shoemaker felt his heart swell. He whispered, "This is no accident." And so it went, night after night, until his shelves were full and his home once again hummed with laughter. The villagers began to speak of him, of shoes that fit as if the feet had dreamed them, of a poor man who suddenly walked with grace. But he and his wife knew better. They knew the work was not theirs alone. One evening, curiosity grew too large for silence. His wife said softly, "Let us stay awake. Let us see." They hid behind the curtain, their hearts beating like small drums. Midnight came. The door creaked, and through the silver spill of moonlight, 2 tiny figures slipped inside. Elves, no taller than a boot, barefoot, quick, and bright-eyed. They danced as they worked, their laughter thinner than bells, their stitches faster than thought. They moved in rhythm, needle, thread, gleam, hum, until every piece of leather became beauty. Then, as suddenly as they came, they vanished, leaving only the faint scent of candle wax and the sound of joy still trembling in the air. The next morning, the shoemaker's wife's eyes shone. "They come to help us," she whispered. "They have no clothes, no shoes. Let us make them something fine." And so she sewed, her fingers trembling with gratitude, tiny shirts with silver thread, little coats trimmed in green, miniature breeches, and shoes soft as petals. The shoemaker polished buckles small enough to fit a sparrow's foot. When it was done, they placed the gifts on the bench and hid once more behind the curtain. At the stroke of 12, the elves returned. They saw the clothes, and their eyes widened like stars. One laughed first, the other followed, and soon they were dancing, twirling, leaping, slipping into their new garments with joy that filled the room. They sang in voices light as wind. "Now we are dressed, so neat and fine, no longer cobblers. The world is mine." And with a final bow, they vanished, out the door, into the night, never to return. The shoemaker and his wife stood silently, their hearts full and aching all at once. From that night onward, no elves came again, yet the work never faltered. His hands moved as though guided still, his heart lighter, his craft more graceful than ever before. The little workshop prospered. Laughter lived there, woven between the hammer's tap and the hum of love's quiet labor. And when they grew old, the shoemaker would sometimes pause, look toward the door, and smile, for he knew, somewhere under moonlight, 2 small feet still danced, wearing the gifts that gratitude had made. The workshop rests in quiet. The night folds itself around old wood and softer air. The moon drifts through the window, laying silver across the worn table, where tools gleam faintly, as if still remembering the touch of unseen hands. The shoemaker and his wife work slower now. Their fingers carry years, but their hearts carry gratitude. Each night before sleep, they pause beside the little bench, not to count their coins, but to whisper thanks to the silence that once answered their need. Kindness, once given, never truly leaves. It changes hands, it shifts its face, but it always finds a way to return. Sometimes it wears boots, sometimes it walks barefoot through dreams, sometimes it hums in the quiet when no one is there to hear. The old pair still leave a candle by the window, not for light, but for memory, for those who once stitched through darkness and taught them that grace is not seen, only felt. And in the hush between stitch and sigh, when the night grows tender and still, some say the elves still dance, not for gold, but for joy. There are truths too light to hold, yet too heavy to forget. Some are found not in thunder, but in a single whisper that dares to be heard. There once lived a king whose wisdom stretched beyond the reach of mortal knowing. It was said that even the wind spoke his name in reverence. Each evening, when the tables were cleared and the laughter faded into hush, a covered dish was placed before him. No one dared ask. No one ever saw what gleamed beneath the lid. But curiosity is its own hunger. A servant, quiet, loyal, gentle in heart, wondered what secret fed such boundless wisdom. And when night fell and the candles thinned to breath, he lifted the cover and saw a white snake, pale as snow, still as thought. He tasted the smallest piece, and then the world shifted. The flutter of wings became words. The grass sang softly in the dark. Even silence had a language, and from that moment, nothing in creation was ever truly mute again. The servant awoke to a world alive with voices. The rustle of curtains whispered of the dawn. The sparrows outside argued cheerfully about crumbs. Even the fire, softly fading in the grate, sighed its last warmth. He walked through the hall as though in a dream. Every sound a secret, every flutter a word. But wonder is a fragile gift. It soon meets trial. One morning, a cry filled the palace. The queen's ring was missing. The court stirred like wind before a storm. Suspicion rose, and eyes turned toward the servant. He protested, but his voice was small beside the whisper of blame. The king, sorrowed yet stern, spoke softly, "If you are innocent, prove it, or bear the weight of guilt." The servant bowed, his heart heavy, his ears open. He went to the courtyard where the sparrows quarreled again, and one, bright-eyed, chirped a careless truth. Such a glittering thing, that ring we saw, swallowed by the duck near the fountain. The servant hurried, and the duck was caught. When it was opened, the ring shone within. The king's face softened. He smiled faintly, and the servant was free. "Your faith has served you," the king said. "Take this horse and gold. The world may yet repay you." So the servant rode forth into the whispering green of the world. At a river's bend, he saw 3 fishes struggling in the shallows. He freed them gently, letting them slip back into silver peace. "Someday," they said in rippling tones, "we will remember." Farther on, he found an ant colony crushed beneath a fallen branch. He lifted it away, careful, tender, and 1,000 tiny voices rose in thanks. "When the time comes, we shall repay." By dusk, he reached the edge of a forest. Above, the sky was cindered gold. He saw 2 ravens calling weakly, their nest empty of food. He cut a piece of his bread and placed it on the stone. The ravens bowed their dark heads. "You have fed life," they murmured. "In time, life will feed you." And so he wandered on, a quiet man with a quiet gift. Then one morning, in a kingdom bright with banners, he saw her, the princess. Her eyes were stars that had forgotten how to dream, beauty wrapped in frost. The king proclaimed, "Whoever shall win her heart must perform deeds no mortal has endured." The servant stepped forward. The hall fell silent. The first task was spoken: bring back the ring lost in the sea. He went to the shore and stood where the waves told endless tales. He called softly, and the 3 fishes came, their scales like shifting moons. They dove beneath and soon returned with the golden ring gleaming in their mouths. He carried it to the king, but the second task awaited: gather the pearls of millet scattered across the meadow before the sun sets. He walked into the field and saw despair spread wide, 1,000 grains like stars fallen to earth. He knelt and whispered to the ants. They came, legions of small devotion, gathering every seed until the last was found. By sunset, the field lay bare and hope shone again. But the king frowned once more. "One last task," he said. "Bring me an apple from the tree of life." The servant bowed. He journeyed far, through forests that murmured and mountains that remembered. When strength began to fade, a shadow crossed the sky. The ravens had returned. They flew beyond the clouds, vanishing into heaven's silence. By night's end, they came back, bearing an apple that glowed with living gold. The servant brought it to the princess. She took it in trembling hands and broke it in 2. They shared it. Warmth flooded the room, a light no fire could make. Her eyes softened, and her voice, once distant, found melody again. "You have done the impossible," she whispered, "not through might, but through mercy." And as the sun rose over their joined hands, the world itself seemed to listen. The world grew quiet again. The rivers hummed softly. The wind moved with care. Every creature kept its secret song, and the air itself seemed to listen. The servant, no longer a servant, now sat beside his bride, a crown resting lightly, as though it, too, remembered humility. He ruled not with thunder, but with calm. When the sparrows quarreled, he smiled. When the ants crossed the courtyard stones, he stepped aside. And when the ravens wheeled above the towers, he lifted his gaze in thanks. He still heard them all, the small voices, the murmurs beneath the world. They did not beg or praise, they simply were. And he, with patient heart, listened, for he had learned that listening is a form of love, that mercy, once given, never truly leaves. His days passed gently, woven of laughter, quiet, and the tender rhythm of a life that had learned to hear. And when the moon rose full over fields of silver wheat, the wind carried a whisper. What we give in kindness returns, not in echo, but in understanding. And somewhere beneath the leaves, the white snake still dreams, holding the first word ever spoken between man and the world.